Unit 8. What is our role in God's plan and storyline? So this is the probably question number 4 of kind of the 4 main questions that this whole course, actually this whole series, is designed to answer. But this is, I think, one of the most important questions that people want to know. Like, where do we fit? If there's this overall plan, where do we fit in God's storyline? And so where does my life fit? It's a really important question that we're going to answer, kind of as we go through this. But one of the main things that we need to understand as we go into this course, right? Another foundational topic is that man is God's steward over the earth. Now, this is going to be really important because a steward is someone who's been entrusted with something. They've been entrusted with a responsibility or a job or a task, and that's one of the things that God has given to man is he has invited us into his rulership as stewards, which means he gives us responsibility and he gives us freedom to kind of do things the way that we want in a certain sense. So it's important when we think about this. Man, God has invited us to rule with him. Like that's pretty cool. Like that's a special thing that no one else, no other creature has. It's a special privilege that man has been invited into. But the thing is that as we're going to look at down the line here, sin is going to mess that up, right? Because what we want is we say, well, we want to kind of rule on our own. We don't really want God's rulership. But one of the things that we need to remember, we need to put it in our minds as we go into this, is that man is never autonomous. Like we are always going to be under God's rulership because he is God. Right? So though God has invited us into rule with him, there's never, ever going to be a time when we are not under his rulership, right? But there's also never going to be a time when certain things are not under our rulership. For example, the earth, right? We're going to learn that the earth was made for man. And so the earth itself is underneath man's rulership, and that would include animals, right? The earth is not equal to man or it's not above man. It is underneath man. And so we are to be good stewards of the earth is a very different concept than man exists to serve the earth. You know, some people might believe that, but that's not the biblical view. Same thing with animals, right? Man doesn't exist to serve animals. Animals exist to serve man. We are above both of those, earth and animals, in the design, but we are not ever going to be above God. We are always going to be underneath his rulership. Okay, so what's the problem with that, right? That brings up a problem, right? Because man has rejected God's rulership. This is kind of the primary problem, right? We're going to get into seeing this a lot over the next sessions, units and modules. We're going to see that man has said no to God's rulership, right? And in doing so, we bring all kinds of problems upon ourselves. In fact, we bring upon ourselves a problem that only God can solve. And so that's what we're going to look at going forward a little bit. But we need to understand that we are participants in the story. We're not just brought in and we're not robots. God has put us in a pretty special spot and given us stewardship. And though we as a race we've messed it up, it doesn't mean that that the stewardship has been entirely revoked. So we're going to look at some of the other questions that kind of are related to the idea. But here, what we want to make sure that we establish is that man has been invited into rule with God. It's been given a limited stewardship by God. And that is going to inform a lot about what we know about as we go further into this. In fact, one of the cool things about the Bible is that there's a psalm. And before we end Module 1, I wanted to kind of just look at this psalm because this psalm is a reflection of this reality that we just talked about, i.e. the idea that man, this tiny species on this tiny little rock floating in space when there's such a massive universe of all existence that could have been invited into this special place of a co-ruler with God or as a steward underneath God's rulership. David reflects on this, right? So in Psalm 8, verses 3 through 9, look at what David says. We're just going to want to read this as we wrap up Module 1 as we get into Module 2. He says, when I consider your heavens, the work of your hands, I'm thinking about the heavens and all of the amazing features of the universe, this moon and the stars which you have ordained. What is man that you take thought of him, or the Son of Man that you care of him? Like, why would man be invited into such a special place? It's like he's saying, right? He says, you have made him a little lower than God, and you've crowned him with glory and majesty. You've made him to rule over the works of your hands, and you've put all things under his feet. Things like sheep and oxen and the beasts of the field and the birds and the heavens and the fish of the sea, right? So he's like, I just can't believe how cool this is that God would not only create all this, but then invite us in and give us management and stewardship within this. And that's why he ends Psalm 8 with just says, O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. And what a cool reflection to end this module with, as we really kind of get into our timeline. So enough foundation stuff. All the groundwork has been laid. You are ready to go. And so module 2 is we're going to look at what happened before creation, because we're going to learn some things about the Bible and about the chronology of the Bible that are going to show that we need to look at. There are some things that happened actually before creation, before Genesis 1:1, that are going to inform a lot. They're going to teach us a lot. So I invite you, join me in Module 2, Before Creation.